Today is an unusual day. I have to go before the city council and speak to them about an incident that took place back in June of 2014 when a police contact was made with me and an injustice was served, and it was brought before the members of the governing body and the safety system, and they ignored it. If I had not taken the steps to go before the council requesting they take a look at this situation and remedy it, I can only imagine how far they would have gone to undermine what the issues and the nature of this situation really are versus what people were led to believe. It involved Officer Austin McGlaun. But you can't really tell because sometimes it looks like it's McGlaun. And I know they have someone with a similar name. According to what he himself wrote, the name is spelled M-C-G-L-A-U-N. Officer Austin McGlaun. He wrote a police report, and I'm going to read what the police report says before I tell you what this particular message is about. I watched him sitting in a car writing this report. He didn't write it on the scene. He actually forgot to write the report until he got near the jail and realized he had to have certain kinds of paperwork to bring somebody into the jail. And I sat in a parking lot with him behind the Liberty Theater here in Columbus, Georgia, while he wrote this. And I can remember telling him, I said, "Sir, you really don't need to do this. You should just stop. Nothing has transpired that justifies the necessity for what you're doing." And he stated to me that he was ordered by his command to arrest me, and that if he didn't, he would get a dereliction of duty, meaning that they would say that he was engaging in what is by law and by ordinance insubordination, which would be grounds to fire him. Now later we would find out that he was already in a pre-existing dispute with the department over his pay. He had already been having internal issues. And so he was taking his frustration out into the community and taking that out on citizens. The report reads as follows. Literally, subject was standing on the edge of the street having a verbal altercation and shouting. Officer Moore and I tried to get him to calm down, and we explained the city ordinance on disorderly conduct, and he continued to shout angrily. Provoked the parties at the scene. This drew a crowd of about 4 or 5 people who came out and stood in the street. This showed that people were becoming distressed. At that time, after being told repeatedly he would be arrested if he did not stop shouting, he would go to jail, he was taken into custody. Now at face value, that sounds like 2 officers that are out here working the beat, just doing their job, and they come across some unruly or irate person that they tried to give some information, tried to work with, tried to do everything they could to avoid a conflict, even letting them know what the city ordinance stated to help them understand that we really don't want to do this, but if you keep shouting as claimed here, we're going to have to arrest you. Ladies and gentlemen, what took place in that scene isn't even reflected here in the report. For starters, I was the one that made the call for Officer Moore and Officer McGlaun to come to the scene. I was violently attacked by a woman, LESSIE Diane Smith, who has a history, her whole family has a history of violent attacks against people. I made a call to the 911 dispatch asking for an officer to come out to stop her. The dispute involved something where she was upset with my uncle from a fight they had the previous day. She was playing games and saying, "Okay, I'm going to leave you. I'm never coming back again." she packed up her things, left the residence, and went to her sister's place. My uncle asked me to help clean up what remained because she lived very filthy and there was a lot of debris left behind. So we started cleaning the place up, and that was that. When she gets to her sister's place and she decides she's going to engage in the behavior that she behaves like over where my uncle is, screaming where you can hear her 4 blocks away, smoking crack cocaine and doing that kind of stuff, bringing people in and out of the house. And her and her sister got into it, and she was thrown out in less than a day. She has nowhere to go, no place she can be. And so she returns back to my uncle's place the following day, angry at him. And apparently she was mad at me for being related to him. And she was trying to get my uncle, whom she's already gotten locked up before, by attacking him and making her attack him back so that the police would have a reason to claim that he did something to her. Well, she attacked me twice, violently, and I had to get her off of me. And instead of doing what I know she was trying to cause to get me and my uncle in trouble, because my uncle is a troubled man himself, I picked up the phone and I called 911 and asked for assistance. Now, according to this report, Officer McGlaun said that the subject was standing on the edge of the street having a verbal altercation and shouting. That implies that when he arrived on the scene, that was already going on. That's the way he wrote it. That's the way he made it look. That's the way, once you learn what the ordinance says and what the state law says and how you can abuse or exploit your discretion, that's what you can do. You can craft that report to look how you want it to look. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. If people write something in a report that they're holding somebody criminally liable for, whether it's a misdemeanor or whether it's a felony, there's supposed to be some evidence. But police have built this reputation where people believe that most of them are out there doing what they're supposed to do, and when they write something about somebody, when they encounter them, they're being truthful about it because they're sworn under the oath and they're just trying to protect public safety. At face value, that sounds good, doesn't it? But we all know what kinds of issues were going on in society and in this community during that period in time. Now, how does Officer McGlaun define these statements? And how does he defend these statements when he was not the first officer on the scene? Officer Moore came to the scene first. Officer Moore had the scene regulated. And if he has a dash cam that he had on at that time, it will show that I was nowhere near the fence. I was deep in the yard. And it will also show that the street was filled with numerous people who were out there committing crime, none of which who lived there, participating in incivility, provoking this woman who is mentally ill to be violent. And they were all sitting there contributing to this lie, pretending as if they had nothing to do with anything. They were the ones that were shouting hostilities and threats because they were mad because when the police were called, I told them, I said, you guys are not supposed to be loitering in the middle of the street, hanging out here committing crime like this, provoking her in the first place. And so all of them got together because they have a fellowship of addiction. They have a fellowship of crime. The thing that they share in common, whether they love one another or hate one another, is the fact that everybody uses drugs. Everybody commits crime. Everybody sells drugs. Everybody gets drunk, and none of them were supposed to be up there. Now, how does he justify making a claim like he claims if I didn't even go to the fence until they asked me to come to the fence? How does he claim that people were coming outside that he observed? If he was watching me, how does he justify having eyes behind the back of his head and can see everybody that he claims was coming out? Where were they coming from, ladies and gentlemen? Because guess what? The people that were already in the street were already there, and the 2 lots that are across the street that he claims people were coming out of, guess what? They're vacant. people burned the house down or destroyed the homes in crack dealing in previous years. There was nothing back there. And the lady that's closest to the scene, directly across the street, witnessed it, and she knows I did nothing wrong. I did not swear at them. I did not resist. I did not obstruct. Nothing. They didn't bother to ask me who made the call. They didn't check on the nature of the scene. Nothing about the contact that they claim in this report was natural, period. They provoked it. They engaged in what the mayor of Columbus calls verbal judo. I pled the fifth. I opted to not say anything. But they basically made me be in a position where if I did not speak with them, they were going to arrest me. When they asked me what was going on and I was telling them, they were only interested in seeing what they could do to rile something up, to get me in a situation where it appeared that I was resisting an officer or I would get in a fight with police. So I'm the one who called, and instead they claim with no evidence whatsoever that they were accusing me of having done something wrong on a baseless claim, just to see if they could provoke it. Now, the state law says that if Officer Martin saw one of his co-workers in policing doing something that violated a citizen or provoked or instigated something that is not natural to the scene, he was supposed to intervene. He did not. Now, how do they claim I'm standing at the edge of the street having a verbal altercation? A verbal altercation with who? Based on what? They can't even tell you what it was claimed I said, because the only thing that I said to those people the whole time they were there was one statement. I said, "Officer, I have a right to be in here raking this yard that I was cleaning for my uncle." That's it. They can't tell you I said anything else. Well, the city ordinance says this and the city ordinance says that. They were provoking, and I said, I did not do anything. I said, I have a right to rake the yard. That's all I'm doing. They don't have anything that's evidentiary to validate what they claimed. What they did was took a bunch of addicts and drunks with no credibility and tried to contrive a way to get them to substantiate this lie. Because their objective when they came there was to get me into an altercation with them so that they can make a justified police contact. See, they can't arrest anybody without a justification. Now, they're claiming that the person who called for their assistance was standing there shouting, having a verbal altercation with somebody for the hell of it when they arrived. Well, help me understand why the person that would be causing a disturbance would be the person that would be calling them for aid and assistance. They checked nobody else's identification. They asked no questions. They did not ask if I was injured. They did not check on my welfare. No duty of care, nothing. Rises to something beyond just mere negligence. Okay, so at the point in time when they claim that they're going to make an arrest, at no point in time was there any obstruction. At no time was there any resistance of an officer. At no time was there any verbal dispute with either one of them. How do they justify these claims? People don't know that there was a prior contact with Officer Moore in previous years. He and a bunch of officers were doing the same thing when they went into a Burger King restaurant and there was a white guy sitting down there drunk. They were going to ambush him, beat him up, and drag him out. And I intervened. And some people question why I would have. And I went and tapped the man on the shoulder and I said, "Sir, get up and walk out of this restaurant voluntarily before these people hurt you." And they got mad because I interrupted what they had planned on using as a justified reason to jump on somebody, because the people in Burger King were harassing that guy. He was dozing off. They said they don't want anybody sleeping in there, and he wasn't bothering anybody. He looked like he was just tired. I don't know. But I didn't think it deserved to have anybody beat him up. From that point forward, Officer Martin had been tracking me around town, giving me dirty looks, and showing up in places since that point in time. I can remember his partner came up and he said, man, ain't nobody professional around here, implying that, look, let us go ahead and do this. This is how we do things around here. Nobody cares about following the rules. He was a real dark-skinned officer. And so Officer Martin did not write a citation. He was the first person on the scene. His car was right there at the fence line. I only came to the fence because they asked me to come to the fence. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Something else that's not in this report. Officer McGlaun, when he arrived on the scene, he parked at the wrong address way down the block, ladies and gentlemen. He couldn't have seen what was going on because he went to the wrong address and walked up the street. And I can tell you how you can validate that. When they made this arrest trying to provoke me, and he had on his little fighter gloves that day, he had to walk me down the street and humiliate me in front of all of those people to get back to where he had parked his car at. And I left my bag and my possessions with the neighbor who lived in that residence that was down the block. Now, how does he justify writing a report to his convenience when the actual facts of the incident were entirely different than what he wrote in this report? Who were the 4 or 5 people that he claimed came out? Because there are only 2 older ladies that live right across the street from that scene. The lady next door wasn't even there that day. Who does he claim walked out, and how was he watching them walk out if he claimed he was so centered on me and what I was allegedly doing? This man falsified this report. He perjured information, submitted it as a record intended to be used adversely against me. And what they were going to do was to cover their butts, go into court and substantiate this false claim and back one another so that they could have a document in the record. And here's what I did to deal with that. I can't stop an officer from making a false claim. I can't stop an officer from making a false arrest. But I do have some control over what happens after that. We were led to believe that we could pay a bond to be released from this situation and come to court. We paid what we thought was a bond, and it turned out we had paid the whole citation, negating the whole incident. Now, they had me scheduled for the exact next day to go into court. This was a rigged situation. They had me scheduled to be in court the very next morning. I showed up in court anyway. And the judge at the time had obviously not really read the information, because if he had looked at it, he would have realized, okay, this citation has been paid, this case has been negated. And he says, well, how do you plead? Well, I wasn't guilty. And there was an incident. So I said, I'm going to plead no contest. Because they were basically telling me that if I did not plead guilty or no contest, I had to go to jail. Which would have been a form of double jeopardy, ladies and gentlemen, because we had already paid the citation. They had to relieve me. We thought we were paying a bond, and it turned out we paid the whole citation. So they never had a chance to put that false testimony into a legal record, is what it amounts to. So the police had nothing to stand on other than this report that this officer submitted. That's their evidence. That's why they write these reports to their convenience. Nobody asked me. You don't hear any testimony from me. You don't see anything that I stated. You don't see anything that shows they responded to the nature of the call. You can go to the 911 dispatch center and look on this day and see that I called for aid and assistance from being attacked. They were coming there to target me and not the person who committed the acts of violence, even though my uncle's house probably has the most calls to the 911 dispatch center of anybody in this community or close to it. Another thing about this citation that people haven't paid attention to is this. I gave this man my driver's license with the address on it. He wrote down the address that he went to at my uncle's place. He disregarded my driver's license. And you can tell he disregarded my driver's license because it says right there on the report, item number 20, the driver's license type, number, and state, and he left it off. And you can see he went and scratched out my name, Reggie, and wrote Reginald because he was holding my license in his hand, writing this report sloppily, just to make sure he did anything at that time. No crime was ever committed. He can't say that anything took place where it was necessary to make an arrest. He just did because they knew the city ordinance and how to exploit it. The same thing they were doing a few years ago when they were enforcing something called the tramp law, meaning that you can go out and based upon what a person's economic status was considered or how they appeared in society, you could make an arrest and consequence them by putting them in jail for being homeless. That's unconstitutional. So I didn't fight with them about it. When we left the court, because the judge knew the case had to be negated, there was nothing he could do with it at that stage unless I chose to take it further. But if the case had already been resolved, what are we going to take it further for? Because it would have cost me more economically to go in and defend the case than paying the citation, ladies and gentlemen. You're not supposed to put that kind of burden on a citizen in the first place for a false arrest and a false claim when they are the actual victim who made the call for police service. And I caught them. So I went to the city council and I said, hey, something very bad has happened here. I have been railroaded with an injustice. I'm bringing this to your attention. Help me resolve this and get this back in alignment before this gets ugly. I don't want to embarrass the police department. I don't want to embarrass the city because you guys have been notified about the problems in that area for 2 years plus previous to this police contact and you ignored it, which is a form of negligence. You have no justification for how you let something that you knew about already become something where the person that was notifying you about real imminent danger is attacked instead. And so to cover it up, they were going to try to use the momentum that the police had in society with police community relations around the city. I could have been shot and killed that day if I did not contain myself and act like a responsible person in spite of what they claimed here. Because if a person is disorderly in a way where a police officer can't control them, they will usually have to take some kind of action to get that person in compliance. You don't see anything that shows I was not in compliance at any point during that scene because he made it up, he perjured, and he exploited the fact that he knew the ordinance to do so, and they brought a white police officer in and a black police officer partnered up so that they couldn't make it look like it involved race relations because a black officer was there. That black officer did not write a report, and I don't know what his claims will be. But if he did not submit those claims into a documented record with this officer McGlaun, why didn't he? Because he knew I didn't do anything wrong, and he sat there and let his coworker and his peer serve an injustice, and he came to court intending to back him and put something into the court record, and I had negated it before they had an opportunity to. And I stopped them in the hallway after the proceeding and told them that you guys made a terrible mistake. You obviously don't know the facts about what's been going on in that community. And another officer comes up behind me and rams into me and almost knocks me into one of them. And you can see it on the cameras in the recorder's court, trying to provoke an incident, trying to figure out some kind of way to get control of me, to ultimately silence me and keep the impropriety previous to this incident on June 11th from being known. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all documented. If you just go and look online at the YouTube channel where I posted these repeated incidents, because after I kept calling for police service and they refused, I kept telling the police chief, I kept telling the mayor and the city council and they ignored it, I had no choice but to get some proof. And when I put that proof out there, it was something that was inescapable, and it was in absolute contradiction to the claims that they were making adversely towards me. And you won't believe that somebody is allowed to act like this year-round, every day, and nobody does anything about it unless you see it. And my uncle is a troubled man, but I was the only one in the neighborhood doing something about it. And the people from that area who know me know that I'm the only one that takes care of that neighborhood. And instead of the police backing me and supporting me, they wanted to exploit that area for that TAD referendum and try to find a way to get rid of the person that was trying to hold on to the economic value of the people who were traditionally in those homes for years before they made that investment. I walked into the council and was attacked and disparaged and defamed in a public forum by public officials that I have never even met, totally disregarding the issues that I brought to them and 100% ignoring it. So when they come in to this meeting that I have today, they're going to say, well, the officer said such and such, and you pleaded no contest, and the issue that is here is a matter of jurisdiction. The police department is not liable. I think you have enough evidence now from the actual person that was there, of what took place. One officer said, well, since that officer is no longer with the department, and the city council and the police department was not there to witness it, and you don't have any witnesses to dispute this, well, too bad. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? If you're part of a scene, you are a witness. I was actually there. I know what nobody from the police department can come in and represent. I was actually on the ground there. In a legal proceeding, I am a witness. And if they go back and they try to coach, coerce, or otherwise tamper with evidence or witnesses, trying to contrive a way to come up with a probable cause to justify this perjury, what does that mean? And so what they were trying to do was, because I challenged this situation because it was wrong and it was unjust, it's a violation of constitutional and civil rights, they tried to make me appear anti-cop to go with the national momentum going on around the country, to turn policing against me, is what they tried to do. Police officers have a discretion to make the decisions based upon what they are trained for, based upon the things that they encounter. But ladies and gentlemen, they do not have a right to violate constitutional and civil rights. They do not have a right to violate due process. And nobody should be defending somebody without evidence. I walked in one council meeting, and I was told by the mayor that she was reading information being held against me from a report, a complaint that she said that I had filed. Ladies and gentlemen, I did not file a written complaint. I came in and did a video complaint before the people so they could see it, because if you only submit a written complaint, they're going to take that complaint and use it adversely against you, or try to build some type of case around whatever you write in. So I went before the governing body and the public safety director, or whoever her substitute was, to confront these issues of injustice in this community. And I wasn't the only one experiencing it. I was just the only one who knew something was wrong and knew what to do about it. And based upon what the law says about what disorderly conduct means, I never, ever, even if I was doing something, broke the law. Because it says clearly that if something about that scene isn't natural, unprovoked, you can't accuse anybody of anything by law. So if you came in and induced it, inflicted it, provoked it, that's not a natural scene. Usually people that are the cause of a problem, most of the time, unless you're somebody like LESSIE, Diane, Smith, they aren't going to call the police if they're the ones making the disturbance. And so what I did was let the actual evidence speak, and you can go online and view it for yourself, and you will be shocked that in Columbus or anywhere else in the world, something like this would be allowed to go on for that long, with that many different officers coming into that scene, knowing that there were those kinds of problems, and then they do nothing about it, and the entire governing body ignored it literally since 2014. No action taken, no written documentation, no contact with me, nothing for a voting citizen. That is against the law. And that is your summary of what transpired in this situation. It was a targeted attack. That officer left the Columbus Police Department because he was already in a dispute internally over some personal issues and his pay. And when these issues were compiled, after they thought that nobody was going to go back and backtrack the injustice, would have gotten him in trouble, and he basically resigned before he got fired, is what it comes down to. And so all of the things that happened to me after that were basically people trying to find a way to cover it up by getting me into something to make it look like I might have been involved in something that I was never involved in, and I didn't fall for it. And thank God for the modern technology today. If Officer Martin's car was in compliance with the patrols of those particular times, he may have some video footage on his dash cam that will show something absolutely in contradiction to what Officer McGlaun wrote in this report. Officer McGlaun was the second officer to come into the scene minutes later. He wasn't even there when Officer Moore first came to the scene. He went to the wrong address down the block. So this guy was screwing up from the time he came into the neighborhood to the time the scene ended, and he anticipated that I was going to resist. See, if you serve somebody an injustice when they're innocent, a lot of people will get angry and resist. I did not, ladies and gentlemen. He didn't even put all my stuff back in my bag. I had to go back and pick up things that were my personal effects. And I said, Officer McGlaun, you can just stop this. You don't even need to do this. This isn't even necessary. And he stated to me that he had been ordered by his superior to arrest me, and if he didn't, he would get a dereliction of duty, saying that he was engaging in insubordination. That's the part that's undocumented. That's the part that you don't see in this police report. You need to look carefully at police reports before you draw conclusions about what you believe, because these people have been around long enough to know how to exploit every general ordinance that's usually acted upon as a customary practice in this community, and they know exactly what it takes to provoke somebody into something that can make it look like it was a justified contact and arrest. Ladies and gentlemen, I was the one that called for service. I was the one that was attacked that day, and they will have no justification why nobody documented anything about the nature of why that call was made for Officer McGlaun to show up in the first place. This is a travesty of justice. I have gone before the council, and I'm going today to ask them for remedy in a peaceful mediation. And I want to request information documented on why nobody since 2014 took an action or responded to this incident, even though they claimed that they were in record. And I also want to know if I can have a copy of the alleged complaint the mayor claims that I submitted that I never actually submitted. This is outrageous, and this is the part that they are not telling you. Now, why would that much be expended on one guy in the first place? When you find out, you'll be shocked. In the meantime, we need to bring this matter to arrest and get this in the public forum so everybody can see what it really is and compare it to the other injustices in this community. It was never about trying to be anti-police or anti-government. They made it look like that.
Crazy too! I'm crazy too!
Well, you think I was saying that, baby.
I said I'm crazy! You bad motherfucker! That's one thing! I put my name and tell my goddamn blue and you stuck your ass, bitch! And whoop your ass! Yeah, that's how you want me, bitch. That bitch, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? What the fuck you gonna do, bitch? Nothing. I got him. What you gonna do? What you gonna do, bitch? Nothing. What you talking about? Tell me I want me. Tell me I want me. I've been alive from that bitch. I would kill the black motherfucker right there. Look at me. I'm not scared. I got the deal. What you gonna do? I got the deal. What you gonna do? I got the deal. What you gonna do? A motherfucking thing to Leslie Diane Smith. I promise you, bitch. What you gonna do? Nothing. I ain't got no show with me, motherfucker. What you gonna do? Nothing. You don't want me, boy. Swear me. Maybe you don't want me. Why get you killed, bitch? Ask that motherfucker uncle you him. You don't want me, bitch.
That man ain't say nothing.
He called me night anyhow. You do not want me. I promise you. He just asked me somebody to get me. You know, let's sit your black ass down. Nasty asshole, bitch. Thank you. What you gonna do? No, don't tell me the damn
How
dude.
you my friend? Yeah. Boy, right. That man.
He don't want me.
He didn't say nothing to you.
I promise, I die. That bitch don't want
He
me.
didn't say nothing to you, though,
That
Dad.
bitch will die. Then fuck with me.
Well, what, Dad? He didn't say nothing.
I wear my name and tell him that stanky ass bitch right there. And he don't care go back to prison. Dumb ass. What you gonna do? What you gonna do, bitch? You looking hard, whore.